This week we are hosting a talk on 1984. We are honored to be joined by Harjinder Singh ji from Akaal Publishers from the UK. Bhai Sahib is an author, writer, and who focuses on Sikh history, philosophy, and politics. Bhai Sahib has also written books such as Reflections on 1984, The Game of Love, all of which is available on the Akaal Publishers website, akaalpublishers.com. We want to thank Bhai Harjinder Singh ji from Akaal Publishers for taking out the time and coming on. Please note this talk will be recorded and posted on our social media platforms. The anonymous question box will be ready in a few minutes, and the verified Sangat will be able to see it, and you will be able to submit your questions. And if the time allows, also feel free to unmute and ask questions directly. We'll see how that goes with the time. And without further ado, we'll pass on to Bhai Harjinder Singh ji, Akaal Publishers, and please ensure you can that you click on the watch stream to view the presentation that Bhai Sahib ji has prepared for this talk. So, Haji Bhai Sahib ji.
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। ਸਤਨਾਮ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਗਗਨ ਤਮਾਮਾ ਬਾਜਿਓ ਕਰਿਓ ਨਿਸਾਨੇ ਘਾਓ ਖੇਤ ਜੋ ਮਾਂਡਿਓ ਸੂਰਮਾ ਅਵਜੂ ਜਨ ਕੋ ਦਾਓ ਪੂਰਾ ਸੋ ਪਹਿਚਾਨੀਏ ਜੋ ਲੜੇ ਦੀਨ ਕੇ ਹੇਤ ਪੁਰਜਾ ਕਟ ਮਰੇ ਕਬੂ ਨ ਛਾੜੇ ਖੇਤ ਪੁਰਜਾ ਕਟ ਮਰੇ ਕਬੂ ਨ ਛਾੜੇ ਖੇਤ ਗਿਆਨ ਧਿਆਨ ਕਿਛ ਕਰਮ ਨ ਜਾਣਾ ਸਾਰ ਨ ਜਾਣਾ ਤੇਰੀ ਸਭ ਤੇ ਵੱਡਾ ਸਤਿਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਜਿਨ ਫਲ ਰਾਖੀ ਮੇਰੀ ਸਭ ਤੇ ਵੱਡਾ ਸਤਿਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਜਿਨ ਫਲ ਰਾਖੀ ਮੇਰੀ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। So the Sangat of Sikh Discord has already sent me some questions, or the moderators have. So this presentation today is actually based upon pre-existing questions that I got from the Discord moderators. In terms of questions today, I'm not feeling too well. I've had a migraine since the morning, so I'm not sure how long I will last in terms of the talk, but I will do the whole of the presentation because of the pre-existing questions. I think there might already be some preset ones at the end as well, but we'll just get going on the presentation. So in terms of the story, so I was asked to cover the build up to 1984. That's the question that we're going to address first. So the characters Indira Gandhi, Sant Jarnail Singh timeline from 1947 to 1984, and the history, propaganda, and what's the actual truth behind that. So initially, in terms of freeing ourselves from the British, we had peaceful tactics of freeing the Gurdwara, where Sikhs peacefully protested to free the Gurdwara. And alongside that, we had the guerrilla tactics as well of the Babbar Akalis. So we had a twofold sort of movement. Mass participation was through peaceful protests, and some Sikhs also raised arms against the British. So that's what we had. We had a twofold movement, and that's what we always have in Sikh history. You either have a peaceful arm and an armed arm. In terms of sacrifices during the British, so freeing India from the British, 73 of the 121 executed were Sikhs. 2,147 of the 266 who got life imprisonment were Sikhs. 799 of the dead in Jallianwala Bagh out of the 1,302 were also Sikhs. And so the source of this is Sangat Singh, page 502 in his book, printed in 1912. So new editions page might slightly differ. Okay, and so what happened was the Sikhs mass participated in the freedom movement. But what they did was they didn't then participate after freeing the Gurdwara on a mass basis, and leaders like Gandhi and Nehru made fake promises to free the Sikhs, to help the Sikhs experience sort of freedom in India, which didn't really happen. So they made fake promises around that. And Pakistan, so Jinnah was the lead person for Pakistan on the left. These two other leaders are Sikh ones, so Baldev Singh in the middle and Masatara Singh on the right. So in Sikh history, we sort of disdain the two Sikh leaders because they didn't really get us anything in independence of the two countries. And in terms of independence, so I've used a tune card from Sikh tunes, and so messages for the Sikhs on Independence Day. So Indian PM is a Sikh, so is the army chief. They seem happy, so should you. So that this was created some years ago. So at the time, Manmohan Singh was Prime Minister. Our constitution considers you Hindu, so do we. Why be a minority when the majority can consume you with the love of Indian government? So these things actually exist, Hannah, in the constitution of India. So did we really get independence in 1947? Pakistan was made a majority Muslim state, with Bangladesh at the time being East Pakistan, I think it was. So Muslims got that in terms of Pakistan and East-West Pakistan, whatever it was called. But we didn't really get our own country. We got our homeland, Punjab, actually divided in two within Pakistan and India. On the Constitution of 1950, there's an Article 25 of the Constitution, and in it, it says these are the actual words from Rihanna. So the reference of Hindus shall be construed as including a reference to person professing the Sikh, Jain, or Buddhist religion. So, and the reference to Hindu religious institutions shall be construed accordingly. So, Sikhs were seen as Hindus, is what it basically says. And up until recently, anyone who was a Sikh who wanted to register their marriage in India used to have to do it under the Hindu Marriage Act. But only recently they've introduced the Sikh Marriage Act. In 1956, the Indian states were set up on a linguistic basis. So Gujarat, the first language of Gujarat was made Gujarati, and so forth for the different states. But Punjab, for some reason, they didn't give Punjabi preference. They made Hindi preferred language. And because of that, the Sikhs then made a struggle to get Punjabi language recognized. And through that, there was a Punjabi Suba struggle. And then what happens is the Punjab we've got today is a truncated state. So at the time, Punjab included Haryana all the way to Delhi and parts of Himachal Pradesh and UP as well. And so what happens is the Punjab we've got today was sort of created in 1966, again through peaceful protests. And if you look at the photo on the right hand side, that's actually from the protests, and you can see it's like Sikh officers as well who were arresting these peaceful protesters. So the protests were led by Mustapha Singh at the time. So we got a truncated Punjab, really. We got a smaller state. We got Punjabi status, but we lost so much as well. And we got Chandigarh as a shared capital with Haryana. And in the 70s and 80s, this is what went on. And so Indira Gandhi, she was an Oxford failure. So she went to Oxford University in the UK, failed at the university. She married a Parsi, right stroke Muslim. I'm not sure what the Parsis are as a race or as a racial group or even a religious group. From what I know, they are generally Muslims. And his name was Feroz. And to cover that up, they gave him the name Gandhi. So his name wasn't really Gandhi, but they just did that to like apni izzat rakhne, let's say. And Indira Gandhi, as she began to be known then because her husband changed his name to Gandhi, she portrayed herself as Durga, so the goddess, or you could say the Devi of war. So Bangladesh got independence in 1971, and a lot of that independence war was fought through guerrilla tactics, and General Subir Singh had a massive hand in freeing Bangladesh from there. And so she was portrayed as like this warmongering, undefeatable prime minister who went against the scourge of Pakistan and freed Bangladesh. But then in 1975, Indira the Tyrant emerges, in which she calls a state of emergency. So she cancels parliament. So state of emergency is very similar to what happened in a lot of countries in COVID. The parliament might have been suspended, everyone went home, no one came on the streets, even the army might have come out on the streets in some places to impose curfews. So the state of emergency in 1975 was very similar to what Indira Gandhi did in India. And she gave reasons for that India's under threat of invasion from Pakistan and a multitude of other reasons. But really, the reason she called the state of emergency was because there was an inquiry into corruption of herself, committing crimes in terms of corruption of election fraud. And she was going to get found guilty in court. And to avoid going to jail, she called this state of emergency for spurious reasons. And for 19 months, from 1975, that state of emergency continued. And it was only the Sikhs who came out at this point. So there's even photos of Narendra Modi, who's the current Prime Minister of India, with the dastar on and mucha. So he actually changed his face into a face of a Sikh to not get arrested. So he's been in politics that long as well. So in 1975, she literally arrested all her opposition as well. And it's only the Sikhs who actually went out and became the last bastion of freedom for India. So the Sikhs were the ones who came out and protested against the emergency. So 50,000 Sikhs courted arrest during this period. You know? And then she also started a sterilization program saying that we need sterilizations because the population of India is out of control. So she forcibly sterilized a lot of people, and greedy people were the ones who suffered in this period because India is very corrupt as a country. So if you can bribe the officials and not get sterilized, they'll just sign the form you were sterilized. But people who were poor couldn't do that, so they were forcibly sterilized, and they're the ones who probably needed offspring in terms of economic continuation for their family or survival. So during this period as well, we get Sant Jarnail Singh come to the forefront in terms of fighting the emergency and going against Indira Gandhi, doing peaceful protests. And even at that time, the Akali leaders all took refuge in Darbar Sahib because they were under threat of arrest. So it's very similar to 1984, what emerges there. So everyone took refuge in Darbar Sahib to avoid arrest. So Bhai Fajr Singh emerges here as well. He wasn't that well known really because even in the Akhand Kirtan Jatha, he was seen as very extreme. So even people in the Jatha might not have liked him because he was very karku. And the Nirankaris emerged as a political group and a religious group who were causing sacrilege against the Sikhs and saying things like, if Guru Gobind Singh made Panch Pyare, we'll make Sat Satare, so 7 stars. And so this was the sort of political turmoil that was emerging. So we had the emergency, lasted for 19 months. And then all of a sudden, on Vaisakhi in 1978, we've got the Nirankaris who are doing BRP challenging the Sikhs, doing a Nagar Kirtan on Vaisakhi Day. And obviously that leads to the clash of the Nirankaris and 13 Sikhs getting shaheed on that Vaisakhi in 1978. And Sant Jarnail Singh led these protests against Indira Gandhi during the Shatabdi of Sri Guru Tegh Bahadur Shahidi. So I can't remember, was my maths is quite bad, and so I can't remember, 300 years of Guru Tegh Bahadur Shahidi. But it was a major date. And during those programs, Sant Jarnail Singh did prachar against Indira Gandhi. Even at Delhi, they actually lambasted the Akali leadership and the Sikh leadership on the stage. Because Indira Gandhi attended a program there, and they all stood up when she walked in, and Sant Jarnail Singh went on the mic. Someone in the UK has got the footage, but the guy's not sharing it at the moment. He's not releasing it. But on the stage, Sant Jarnail Singh says that if one, you did Biyadbi by standing up to give her respect in Guru Granth Sahib Hajuri, and secondly, she wouldn't even exist as a Hindu if Sri Guru Tegh Bahadur had given the Shahidi. So Sant Jarnail Singh immediately went against Indira Gandhi 2 times, in terms of the emergency, and then this as well with the Shatabdi. And the problems that the Sikhs faced at the time: alcohol abuse, minority status in India, minority status across the whole of India, legislative discrimination in terms of what we said in terms of the Hindu acts and stuff as well, in terms of marriages and things like that. Loss of Punjabi areas via the Punjabi Suba. So there's areas of Punjab that were lost to Haryana, so like Ambala, it's majority Punjabi speaker and majority Sikh. Places like Shahbad as well, so very close to the Punjab-Haryana border, those areas were lost. Attacks on faith of the Sikhs, heritage and practices, so the Nakli Nirankaris, and setting up like fake godmen to go against the Sikhs as well. Punjab then, during this period, also experiences a green revolution. So with the current Kisan Morcha and things like that, a lot of things have come out about the green revolution that occurred. So in the past, a lot of us, especially me, like as Pracharas, we used to say it's been a good thing for Punjab, but now it's coming out actually for the long-term sustainability of Punjab is actually one of the worst things to happen because of pesticides and things like that, and multinationals coming in there. But in essence, in terms of the prosperity of India, the green revolution in Punjab created a breadbasket for the whole of India. So paddy came from Punjab to the rest of India. So mechanization of farming in Punjab, and use of pesticides and other things like that. So double, triple usage of the land, where it had been one crop in a year, they were putting out 2 or 3, plus the water, so using the water of Punjab or using agricultural electricity to pump the water and things like that. So what the Punjabis needed at this point was economic justice as well. So the growth of state wealth occurred, but there was a lack of inward investment. So the state wasn't getting money back really, and even with the paddy, they weren't getting fair prices. River waters of Beas and Ravi are still to this day diverted to other states and diverted even to desert lands in Rajasthan. And Punjab's a water-rich state; that's its only resource. Yet they don't get no recompense in terms of international law of the water usage. And nationally, all these problems that the Sikhs raised were portrayed as communal problems, and the Sikhs are just being problematic as a community rather than addressing the real needs of the Sikh community. Now, the brains behind the movement were two Gursikhs, which are here on the screen, and so Sardar Kapoor Singh and Sant Jarnail Singh. So Sardar Kapoor Singh in that photo where he's sitting is Sant. Gopal Singh Shaheed, who's from America now currently, who lives in California, he actually carried Sardar Kapoor Singh on his shoulders up to the roof where this photo was taken, because Sardar Kapoor Singh at the time couldn't walk because of old age. But Sardar Kapoor Singh is the author of the Anandpur Sahib resolution. So let's go to the next slide. So Anandpur Sahib resolution was actually written just before 1973. So in October 1973, it's first introduced as a document to the Akalis by Sardar Kapoor Singh, and then 1978 sort of gets adopted to pursue Hannah as a policy document, let's say. Hannah. So what was the Anandpur Sahib resolution saying? If you want to see, you can find it on the internet, and it should be on sikhshahada.com, I think. So there'll be a lot of documents you can find on the internet on sikhshahada.com. The website's not very popular, but it's got a lot of resources on there. And also, you can find it at the back of my book, Reflections on 1984, so the full document of the Anandpur Sahib resolution. So this is just snippets, just key points. So Sikh autonomy within the Union of India, bringing together Sikh populations. Now, true federal system, so the central government only have rule over defence, foreign relations, currency and general communications. So these 2 points, the first one, the grey one and the yellow one at the top, it was about ensuring that what happened in the emergency in 1975 for 19 months didn't occur again, that the centre cannot impose draconian laws on the whole of India. So that's why they wanted a true federal system, a bit like the US, and that the centre only interfered in minor things in the state. So what the Sikhs were actually fighting for was freedoms of all states in India, not just for Punjab. So that's what this was about, and then bringing together Sikh populations from adjoining states to back into Punjab as well. So like I've mentioned already, Ambala and places like that, even UP, even Rajasthan, Ganganagar and places like that, because the Sikhs lost out when they got Punjabi Suba. Equitable distribution of river water. So if you give it to other states, you give us some money for it. Chandigarh as the capital of Punjab, not a shared capital. Economic reforms and possibly a Ludhiana stock exchange. Minority quotas removed from armed services, and so that was one of the things that they did, Hannah. But what we were saying was we should get those reinstated as a martial race. So Yodhyani Khan dominated Akaal. So Baba Deep Singh, as you know, fought from Darbar Sahib. So did Baba Gurbakh Singh, the second Jathedar. And then we had Sant Jarnail Singh during 1984. In terms of Sant Jarnail Singh was present at the Narankari clash in terms of being at the Darbar Sahib, but the Singhs agreed that Sant is not going to go. And my personal belief is Faja Singh knew he was going to get Shaheed as well. So Sant Jarnail Singh actually does the Ardas for the Jatha to leave, but it's agreed before the Ardas is done that Sant's not going to go to the protest. Now, what it was at the time, the Sikhs, as far as they were concerned, they were going for a peaceful protest. So it wasn't like an armed clash. So the Sikhs, obviously, you're going on a protest, you still pick up whatever you can. So they just picked up whatever dang sota was there and just went. Now, Sant Jarnail Singh was, in essence, a leader of a seminary, which is Anandpur Sahib, which is like a school of education in Sikhi. So that's what he was, that's what he represented. Spoke against Sikh discrimination and Sikhs being enslaved. Now, what you have to realise is while Sant Jarnail Singh, prior to 84, might have become popular in Punjab, but in terms of the national perspective of Sant Jarnail Singh, because of the media and things, Sant Jarnail Singh was generally seen quite badly by Sikhs. But what happened was all his words in his speeches became prophetic, because what he said actually happened to everyone. So even if it wasn't happening with you at the time, and you thought Sant was speaking wrongly, when Delhi genocide happens in 84 and other things happened, it became to be everyone's rule step. So everyone realised actually he was right all along. So Sant Jarnail Singh courted arrest voluntarily for investigation into the murder of a journalist, which is Lala Jagdaren, in 1981. And even when he gets arrested in 1981, when he courts arrest at Mehta, the police opened fire and killed, I think, 7 Sikhs at Mehta at the time. So he courted arrest voluntarily. So if we're going to say that they came to get Sant Jarnail Singh in 1984, well, he courted arrest. Why wouldn't he court arrest again? And there was never any arrest warrants, and there was never an FIR. So an FIR is the first information report. To report any crime in India, you have to register an FIR, which is the first information report. So that's how a criminal charge starts. That's the pursuit of a criminal charge. There's not a single FIR out on Sant Jarnail Singh. Sant Jarnail Singh voluntarily goes into prison, and gets questioned for a number of days and comes out, I think, within 20 days or something like that. So there was a face-off with the government about Sikh rights in terms of the Dharamik Morcha and other things. So Bhai Amrik Singh, Baba Tara Singh, Harjinder Singh Longowal emerged in this period. So what actually happens is a guy called Jagir Singh Mahant gets arrested. Bhai Jagir Singh Mahant is Singh of the Akaal, and he's still alive. I interviewed him a few weeks ago. But Mahant gets arrested. I think this is 1982, if I'm right. Yeah. So Mahant gets arrested, and I can't remember which order it is. I think it's Bhai Amrik Singh goes to free Mahant from his charges. So he goes to the police station to investigate, and they then arrest Bhai Amrik Singh. Then Baba Tara Singh goes to free Bhai Amrik Singh, and they arrest Baba Tara Singh. So both Baba Tara Singh and Bhai Amrik Singh, that's what everyone knows in terms of Sikh history, that they got arrested. It's like a little unknown fact that Mahant was the first one in actually that it all started from. And then that snowballed, and then Sant Jarnail Singh started peaceful protests to get them freed from jail, especially Bhai Amrik Singh because he was the leader of the All India Sikh Federation. Baba Tara Singh was the Jathedar of Mehta, so as the Gurdwara and the Taksal Dera, and he was respected in the Taksal as well. So the Taryat Morcha, the Akalis clocked on that their Anandpur Sahib resolution, their Mata wasn't getting anywhere. So they then thought, let's use this document and do what Sant is doing with the peaceful protests with freeing these Singhs. So they then brought that forward and then relabeled it, let's say, peaceful protests, and called it Taryat Morcha. And so what they started doing, Rasta Roko, Rail Roko, so do roadblock, do a train block, and there he is, yeah, our old Muggins, Prakash Singh Badal, yeah, Badal Sada, so Badal's been around that long, yeah, he's already been the chief minister at this point, and there he is caught in arrest, yeah, playing the victim. But anyway, I don't particularly like it, it's not being so critical. Anyway, mass movement of peaceful protests, so between 1982 to 1984, and led by Sant Longowal. Sant Jarnail Singh repeatedly says he is the dictator of the Morcha, but really Sant Jarnail Singh was seen as a figurehead as well. 250,000 Sikhs, a quarter of a million Sikhs caught arrest, peacefully protesting during this period. And in terms of the All India Sikh Federation, there's two other figures here, Anna. So Bibi Abkar Gaur on the left, who's the leader of the president of the women's wing of the federation, and this is Harjinder Singh Sandhu, who's the general secretary. But Harjinder Singh Sandhu, up until recently, we couldn't say this even though we knew, he also led a militant organisation called the Besmirch Regiment. So prior to 1984, assassinations were carried out by Babur Khalsa, so that's Singh's on the left, bottom left, and in the white you can see Bhai Vadawa Singh Babur, who's the current leader of Babur Khalsa. To the left of him, between the big Singh with the white star as well, with the big C7, that's Bhai Dalwinder Singh Babur. And to the left of him further with the Garva in his hand, that's Bhai Kalwan Singh Nagoke. Yeah, so that's one of the original photos in terms of Babur Khalsa before they got sort of famous, let's say. So these Singhs on the left, in the bottom left, they're the Babur Khalsa Singhs, and they were carrying out assassinations since the Narankari Khan, since 1978. But then the unknown element, which was led by this guy on the right, Harjinder Singh Sandhu, was the Besmirch Regiment. The Besmirch Regiment was also carrying out assassinations, and the Besmirch Regiment was made up of mostly the Singhs of the Taksal and the Federation. But the Besmirch Regiment, they used to take Jumawari, so they used to take responsibility for certain killings, but no one knew who they were, who was the leader, who it was run by, and it was all under a cloud of mysteries. So I've got recently Singhs confirming it was always Sandhu who was the leader. So in these photos, you got Harjinder Singh Sodhi and Bhai Manbir Singh Chaheru. Top left, you got General Lab Singh, and that same Singh Gopal Singh Shaheed is sitting opposite General Lab Singh there with some sort of gun. It looks like possibly Aura Mayana for the Gurban. Then you got Baba Mano Jal, and you got Chaheru again, Bhai Manbir Singh Chaheru. So all these Singhs are Shaheed on this photo. Now, apart from the top left, the Gopal Singh Shaheed, I'm not sure about the others in the Prakar map, but the ones at the back, one of them definitely Shaheed in 84 as well. So training, arms and fortifications by the defending Sikhs in Darbar Sahib. Sant Jarnail Singh had about 20 Sikhs getting arms training from an ex-army official from the 1970s. They would go to his home for training, and sometimes he would come to them. So this was confirmed by Malik Singh, who lives in the UK, who was a tabla player, who was a child at the time in the Taksal. And all these Singhs went on to fight valiantly in 1984 and all got Shaheed. So they were getting military training from this period. So they were already prepping for the attack. And also, we already mentioned Babur Khalsa and the Besmirch Regiment. So I listened to an interview of Gurnam Singh Bandala who's a Singh of the Sal, who lives in India, still alive. And Bundala was saying that his village is quite near to the border with Pakistan. So he used to purchase arms from Pakistani smugglers and pay for them, and they would drop them into his land because the border was like a porous border, let's say, and it wasn't like a fenced one at that time. So they used to drop the stuff off in his kit, and then he paid them, and then Bhai Manveer Singh Jahiru and General Lab Singh will come and collect those arms off him and use them. This is pre-84, and Sant also amassed a secret collection of arms too. And if you think of it, if the Singhs are getting training from the 1970s from Sant Jarnail Singh's time, they will be collecting arms and stocking them and stockpiling them. And fortifications in the attack were mostly done by ex-Indian Army personnel, so General Sabir Singh and others. So there's a Fauji Singh in the Babur Khalsa, and there's also Fauji Singhs who are still alive who were in the attack, which we don't really talk about much because obviously they were in the attack, so I'm not sure if they can speak. I don't want to mention some of the names. Dal Khalsa and the Council of Khalistan were seen as two political outfits at the time, prior to 84. So Dal Khalsa was led at the time by Harjinder Singh, who's in the top. He now lives in exile in Pakistan, and he served a sentence for hijacking an airplane prior to 84 because of persecution. I think the rest of Sant Jarnail Singh is when he hijacked the airplane. He didn't use any arms. He had some sort of goal on him, some sort of ball, and he said it's a bomb. And he hijacked the plane to Lahore airport, and he served a sentence in jail there as well in Pakistan. He now lives freely and openly. You can find his profile on Facebook. You can even speak to him on there. Council of Khalistan was also a political body. So both these groupings as well, they had like offices in Darbar Sahib prior to the attack. So these were the two bodies that you're seeing as outright Khalistani before 84. And again, this Gopal Singh Shaheed Singh keeps popping up, and he's there again, sitting next to Balbir Singh Sandhu. So Balbir Singh Sandhu on the right-hand side, he was like a political spokesman for the Council of Khalistan. And in 84, 5th of June 1984, he leaves the complex and goes to Pakistan, and he never came back to India, and he died out there in Pakistan. And I'm not sure of the year of his death now, but it was reported in the press that he's died out there. So he passed away there. So you can see he's quite old there in that photo. So when he died, I can't remember what it was now, 20, probably like 5-10 years ago. Now this General Sinha, you can Google him, and there's interviews with him. So when Sant Jarnail Singh court's arrest in 1981, General Sinha was approached of how to arrest Sant Jarnail Singh from Mehta, and they asked him to sign off giving tanks to arrest Sant Jarnail Singh. Then he said, "What are you talking about? Why am I going to give you tanks for guys who've got like desi guns, like just like rifles and stuff? So you can just take some armed police officers, you don't need the army to arrest him." And so he refused to sign off the tanks. So he irked Indira Gandhi at that point. And then when they approached him about 1984 in June, attacking Darbar Sahib, the actual advice he gave was, do not attack, put it all on live TV, set up a Godra, so he's basically do Prakash or Sri Guru Granth Sahib outside the clock tower and get people to Matha Teka there, and then request the Sikhs inside, who they're saying thereafter, to then court arrest and come out peacefully. Obviously, none of his advice was listened to, and he then avoided like promotions and stuff, whereas General Vedya and people like that took promotions by doing what Indira Gandhi wanted to do. So agreeing the attack in the Indian army, so you got General Brar on the left, Vedya's in the mid. No, Vedya's in the middle, I think, and I think the one on the right is Sundarji. There's also another one which was a Sardar who's in the photos. He usually got read the star called Ranjit Dayal. You can just see him behind the middle person. You can see a small star coming out the back. That's Ranjit Dayal there. And there is another guy, Muslim, I can't remember his name now, but he's still alive as well. He's interviews on YouTube and stuff as well. So the Indian army signed off the attack. The Akali Dal also signed off the attack. So this is the interesting part. So I'm not saying Sant Longowal did, but some of the Akalis, Ramowal and people like that, and the Barbals and people like that wanted the attack because they could no longer control Sant Jarnail Singh. And they banned Sant Jarnail Singh speaking off the stage at Manji Sahib. So some speeches that you see on the internet are only up to, I think it's 82 or 83 possibly. But after that, Sant Jarnail Singh doesn't literally speak for a year off the stage. And all the speeches or any recordings you have are either on the roof on the Langar Sahib or at the Kal Tak Sahib. And then Sodi's assassination happens on the 13th April 1984. And there's a recording of Sant Jarnail Singh speaking one day after the assassination. And the assassination was actually done by the Akalis. And Sant Jarnail Singh had that surgery of Ekta that much that he still didn't assassinate the people who called the hit. So the people who called the contract. The people who actually assassinated Sodi, which was a woman and a guy, they were killed within 24 hours, the actual assassins. And what the Indian government did is created fake hysteria of mass violence in Punjab and it being out of control. When you look at the white paper carefully, they don't mention any arrest warrants for any Sikhs in the Bhai Sahib. And the mass hysteria of mass violence, I've done this in my book anyway, in Reflections, we make comparisons of the violence in other states. So there wasn't actually a violence problem in Punjab, it was just what they were reporting. Preparations, the SAS were asked for advice, and British involvement is confirmed, even though they've destroyed most of the papers. We know 100% that the SAS did that. There's talk of models of the Bhai Sahib being made in the Jakarta Hills and other things, and the SAS giving them advice of commanders how you could go in there and take them out. In terms of the Bhai Sahib, obviously from 1604 till this present day, is the epicenter of Sikhs, it's our heartbeat, and the Indian government thought that force a heart attack and the rest was history, and how wrong they were. So in October 1983, they call President's Rule, which means they cancel the rule of the state government. So the state is ruled directly by the president. Indian Army training, we would have said this, and that's the Sunday Times reported this in 1984 as well. Sikh preparations also. There's no denying that the Sikhs inside weren't preparing. Sant Jarnail Singh says repeatedly the day the Indian Army attack is the day the foundation stone for Khalsa is laid. So it's an inevitable standoff that was going to happen. Plus, it comes in Sasaki as well in terms of predictions and prophecies for the future. So things like that. And Garban and other parts like that. So there's media blackouts as well. So it's very different to how you've got so many platforms that we sit on this on Discord. Back then, there was literally one channel in India, one TV channel, and the press was all controlled by the state. So there was very independent publishing or speaking, and if there was, the journalist would usually get charged with sedition. And electioneering again. So if you think what happens is Indira Gandhi, she calls the emergency, but then she loses the next election, and the government doesn't last. Then she gets re-elected, and now she's electioneering again as Durga, the goddess. So she's going to deal with the scourge of the Sikhs now. Whereas before it was freeing Bangladesh, now she's going to deal with the Sikhs. She's Durga again, and that's what she's dealing with, Anna. So the Indian Army, we went inside with humility in our hearts and prayers on our lips, but we all know thousands of Sikhs died. So how they went in like that would have been the actuality if they'd done what General Sinha said, which is said we got that outside and wait for people to leave, but they didn't do that. They opened fire indiscriminately. So constructing a threat, Hannah. So vilify, create an artificial threat, justify excessive force. So that's what they were doing in the media. So weapons of mass destruction. We all saw in the Iraq War there was never any. And in reality, in 1984, there's no threat to Indian national security from the Sikhs. So it's similar to what happened in the Iraq War, and it just lies. And revenge for the emergency for the Sikhs and Sant Jarnail Singh in 37 sent in Nagar Kirtan. 40,000 Sikhs courted arrest. Nationally, 440,000 Indians caught arrest, and that was during the emergency. Indira loses the election, like I just said, back in 1981. White paper says lawlessness, yet no charge sheets or arrest warrants for anyone in the Gurdwara. And if you have to realise is they're saying they're Bhai Sahib, but they agree in their own white paper that they attacked another 42 or 44 Gurdwara. And again, no arrest warrants for anyone. And DC Gurdev Singh, so he's like the magistrate for the whole of Amritsar, so the highest ranking civil administration officer, he refused to sanction the army to enter, and he was relieved of duties on the 2nd of June. And even the Punjab police in Amritsar, they actually said, look, we know Sant Ji, we know General Lab Singh, we know all the Singhs. If you want us to go to arrest them, we know who they are, we can identify them and go in and pull them out. So even the Punjab police weren't listened to. So it was all done through the centre. And it's clandestine on both sides and the preparations occurring. 70,000 army entered Punjab, 15,000 used in the attack. And then Lieutenant General Harjinder Singh Arora in 1984, he made this statement. So he's quite critical, very critical of the attack. So since independence, it was for the first time that the Indian Army had been employed to fight a pitched battle against the section of its own people. The assault on the Golden Temple on the 5th to 6th of June 1984 turned a shrine of great sanctuary into a battlefield. The immediate question that arises is, was the army action really necessary? Was it the only solution? My view is that it was not. So CRPF, which is the Central Reserve Police Force, so it's like an unarmed section of the police, they open indiscriminate fire upon Darbar Sahib on the 1st of June without any warning between 12:40 p.m., so midday, to 8 p.m. And the President of India at the time, Zal Singh, confirms that in his memoirs. So you can purchase his memoirs, and he actually says that no warning was given and firing was open. Now, there was an issue with Zal Singh saying, because the Sikhs thought that because he's seen as the chief officer of the Indian Army, that he'd actually approved the attack. But actually, he didn't approve the attack because they'd signed off an ordinance in Punjab whereby they wouldn't have to go for president's approval if they were going to call the army in. So actually, they sidestepped him in a clever way. So I'm not saying Dale Singh would have approved or disapproved of the army going, but actually he didn't even know he was in the dark. So in his memoirs, he only released his memoirs when he's dead. So he had to say it when he died, but he then says he admits that no warning was given and they opened indiscriminate fire. No response to fire from inside, from the Sikhs inside, Anna. So we say that Bhai Menga Singh responds, but generally that it couldn't draw out anyone's fire on her in terms of the rest of the Sikhs. And the White Piper's silent on the 1st of June, it doesn't say, it just says that it starts on the 2nd of June, Anna. And All India Radio is saying that firing from within Darbar Sahib on the 2nd of June, which is wrong, it was actually from outside. Devinder Singh Dougal, who was the librarian at the time, he says there's 8 deaths on the 1st of June and 34 bullet holes in Darbar Sahib, some 3 inches wide as well, on the 1st of June. So if you look at the video that Khalsa just released, I'm not sure if it's on that, but Brar saying that no, we didn't fire at Darbar Sahib at any point. But I go in 1988 to Harjinder Sahib, and I can see these 3 marks on the outer shell of Darbar Sahib when you go to Matha. So I could see that with my own eyes in 1988, let alone in 1994. And the curfew was lifted at 8:30 p.m, so people could come and go from the complex. Bhai Menga Singh gets sheathed and so do 7 others. On the 2nd of June, so I'm doing this day by day because this is one of the questions that came from Discord as well. So Indira Gandhi does a national address, which is also on that video that's just been released. That video, what you have to realise, that was propaganda tapes carried by the Indian government, and the tapes were actually 3 hours long. So Kshatri Khalsa, the account, he's just improved the quality of it, and he hasn't released all of it because he knows it's quite damning, the whole thing. And Indira Gandhi does a national address and she ends the appeal saying, "Don't shed blood, shed hatred." I remember actually seeing this on national TV in the UK as well, this appeal, and we all knew they're going to attack Darbar Sahib at that time. At the time, she'd already authorised the army to do precisely that, to shed blood. And so there's a quote from Kashwant Singh there, saying this would generate hatred, that the country hadn't experienced since independence. On the night of June, 2nd of June, so Kashwant was also very pro-Indira Gandhi, but he turns on her at this point. So on the night of 2nd of June, the army replaces the CRPF and the BSF. So the BSF is the Border Security Force, all leaving the complex. So anyone leaving the complex on the 2nd of June is arrested and interrogated. Sikhs allowed to enter for the Shahidi Burg the next day on the 3rd of June, and 10,000 Sikhs entered and then trapped also as the trains were cancelled leaving Amritsar. Foreign journalists were banned from Punjab by law on the 3rd of June. The pilgrims had been given no inkling or warning either of sudden curfew or imminent attack. It was to be a black hole type of tragedy, not out of forgetfulness, but out of deliberate planning and design. So innocent people slaughtered like rats, first letting them into the complex and then declaring the curfew, which prevented them from going out. Thousands were caught unawares. Finally, when the survivors were asked to surrender, they were shot in cold blood. So that's from Amir Rao et al. So those people, there were a group of Hindu researchers who did the first eyewitness accounts, and the report was called Oppression in Punjab. It was published in 1985, and Citizens for Democracy was the name of the organisation. When they wrote that report, all of them were arrested under sedition as well. So we had thousands of these reports flying around in the UK, and even in Punjab, the Sikhs just published them en masse, even though it was banned, and to this day it's still banned. So the Shahidi Burg DJ Bash on the 3rd of June. On the 4th of June, so Sikhs are trapped, buses were cancelled, trains didn't leave Amritsar on the 3rd of June, and no one could get out. And the army attack just starts, all-out attack, firing and bombardment, all directions, non-stop until the 6th of June. So if you watch the Battle of Amritsar, this is where Mukhi says that the first bomb sort of lands at Akaal side when they're doing Kirtan, they go inside and do the Kirtan. So they cut water and power, so the water tanks were blown up at this point, stop water in the complex. Up to 20,000 Sikhs inside, deaths from heat and dehydration. If you think of the June temperatures in India, even now today, like 40 degrees, 45 degrees. And the army actually said to Sikhs trapped inside when they saw them to drink the mixture of blood and urine off the ground when people begged for water. And some even went to the extent of drinking water from drains mixed with blood because they couldn't get anything else on it. And then on this day, Raghi Amrik Singh, who's drinking the Darbar, said he's killed by a gunshot from outside from the army. A female student near Akaal Sahib asked for people. The army asked people to surrender, so they made an announcement. And many were desperate for water, so they went out. And in the morning, she saw their dead bodies on the Parikrama. So these female students also mentioned that Citizens for Democracy report. So that's what she says. So she didn't go out, but the people who did surrender were killed. And 42 other Godras were alleged terrorists taken have also attacked her on the 5th of June. So the white paper saying terrorists in Godras across Punjab, and if no surrender, they're flushed out. So the white paper is actually admitting this wasn't just about Darbar Sahib, it wasn't just about Sant Jarnail Singh. They're saying there's a statewide problem with Sikhs in Godwara being armed, so they attack 42 Godwaras simultaneously across the whole of Punjab. Again, no charge sheets or arrest warrants for any of these so-called terrorists. On the night of the 5th and 6th of June, the army take control of most of the complex, and then they go on to destroy Akaal Takht with tanks. So it's about 10 a.m. that all fighting has ended, and curfew lifted between 12 to 5 p.m. And it's quite interesting because one of the interviews I did recently, the Singh said to me he escaped on the 5th of June, and then when the curfew is lifted between 12 to 5 p.m., he actually goes back to the Darbar Sahib and sees 13 tanks near Nanak Niwas and then Saras. So they didn't know he was a fighter, and then he escaped. Many killed as they came out, surrendering. Many surrendered as curfew lifted during the day. Arrested, the SARS removed, tied hands, and shot point blank in the Parikrama. So there's a lot of those pictures going up, I think. Dosh Khanna has an account on IG where you can see some of the photos and people looking for their relatives in it. So in terms of the defenders, so Sikhs who defended Sachkhand, the Darbar Sahib, there's about 85 maximum really. The list of the shaheeds, I think, is about 78 people. The list of actual shaheeds in there, I think at the moment, I think the list we've got, can't recall, and I think we've got to 400 or 500 people now. So Tribute 80 or 1984, the website, we've got a list on there now that we've collated recently by amalgamated and cross-referencing some of the list. But in actuality, thousands died. But actual fighting Sikhs, even if there was a maximum of 200, a lot of them left on the 5th of June, and so the actual fight to the end, and it was about 85. And they listed the actual sheets in the attack in the Ajaib Ghar. So if you go to the museum in Darbar Sahib and you walk to the end of the museum, the names are listed on the wall there. And Gurmeet Singh Cheema, he's an eyewitness, and he says 800 people were massacred in Guru Ramdas Sarah at the end of the attack, whereby the army threw grenades and started firing upon women and children in the Sarah. So this is where people were collated. General Subhaig Singh fortified the complex, as we already mentioned earlier on. Weapons. General Brar makes the accusation that why did they have complicated weapons and all this, so it's nonsensical, because Shemit Pasha sets up Akaal Takht Sahib on the basis of going against Mughal Raj and breaking their laws, which is you cannot sit on a platform higher than 6 foot. So Maharaj made a platform 13 foot. You cannot raise an army, so Maharaj raised an army. You can't hold arms, so Maharaj held arms. Maharaj used guns at the time. Maharaj used explosives. Hanji. Oh, all right. Okay, there's some voices. Stop now.
Let's continue.
All right. So why fortified, Anna? It's always been a focal point of our revolution, as it was in the emergency, So it's always been a place where Sikhs have taken refuge. It's not that it's not been. So that's why the Sikhs did what they did. And the Sengs inside were never fought back unless they were attacked. They knew if they didn't fight back, more people would have got killed. So persecution of the Sikhs. So army started doing combing operations after June 1984, arrest, torture, and hold male Amritaris. And village after village was surrounded. The houses of Sikhs, never Hindus, were searched for arms. Sikh young men taken for questioning, beaten up, and tortured. Amongst people charged and declared absconders arrested were retired army officers as well. So these army officers giving their lives to the Indian state, and then they were arrested and declared terrorists. So for 1 to 3 months, the army presence remains in Punjab. Now this is like a complete blackout. So we've got the odd quote like this, but we have no idea of the real numbers involved in what was called Operation Woodrow, so like a calming operation across the whole of Punjab. And at this point, a lot of the Sikhs are on the run. So the Babur Khalsa Singhs, for 1 year, everyone assumed they were Shaheed. Babur Thakur Singh's on the run as the leader of the Akaal for a whole year. And numbers of arrests unknown again. At least 8,000 in October still held, and that's what we know. Questions. So these are the questions that some of you had put in the Discord as well. Was Operation Blue Star reported on internationally immediately? Yes, news bulletins across the globe and on TV and print media, but India controlled the narrative. That's what you have to realise. Doordarshan was the only TV channel and print media control. Slowly overcoming months, eyewitness accounts began to emerge, so that Citizens for Democracy report was 1984. Those who printed them were charged with sedition. So Brahmachalani is one of the people that's always mentioned in that as being in seeing dead Sikhs and stuff with their hands tied behind their backs because he remained in Amritsar. But Brahmachalani, you can actually find him on Twitter. He's never spoken ever again about 1984. He's still alive, still a journalist, but he's never ever spoken. So you'll see him quoted, but he never spoke about it ever again. He was silenced. So he was charged with sedition, which is basically going against the state for telling the truth. And then, probably knew he was going to get killed. Was the November genocide reported on too? Yes, again, TV coverage occurred, but made out to be sporadic riots. So it wasn't reported as a genocide or a pre-planned thing. It was just saying, oh, Indira Gandhi's been killed by Sikh bodyguards, and now there's riots occurring. And I saw a TV interview just the other day by Singh, and he was saying he was there at the hospital when Amitabh Bachchan arrives there to go into the hospital. Indira Gandhi's been shot, and he says, "You were Sikh?" And he says, "Yes." And when Amitabh Bachchan's going to the hospital, he says, Gadaria, which means he's a traitor to the nation. And these Sikhs are Gadars. Everyone attack him, and the guy gets attacked by everyone outside the hospital. No? And even Gyani Jail Singh, who was the president of India at the time, when he comes to the hospital, even his car's attacked as well. So they used the Gyani Jail Singh thing as a thing to say even the president wasn't spared, but they made it out to be just like a communal racism thing against Sikhs. But we have TV news reports of Sikhs in refugee camps. If you find some of those clips, so Civil Guards of British Organisation of Sikh Students in the UK released that footage, so it should be on YouTube somewhere. So we've got like collation of news reports of Sikhs in refugee camps. So post being targeted and displaced from their homes. Foreign intervention in Operation Blue Star was one of the questions. So Israel, UK, and US saw rumours of Pakistan CIA. UK 100% gave advice on how to storm the complex via the SAS and elite soldiers unit, but that all failed because the commandos that did attack in the complex, they all failed. So if you look at any armed strategy, any army that fights always protects their soldiers first. And when they attacked the Darbar Sahib, they had to bring tanks because that was the only way they were going to win the battle. So it got to that level with air support, with bombing as well from the air and things like that. So it became to the level they had to take armed carriers. CIA is very murky as an agency and always keeps tabs on what is going on, but pro-Pakistan at the time. I'm not going to mention who I think was CIA operatives in the complex because it gets complicated because you get Discord might get charged with the what do we say? You can get charged with speaking wrongly against someone. But we'll just leave it at that, yeah. But anyway, India accuses Pakistan of propping up the Sikhs to fight, but very scanty evidence to substantiate the claim. Although again, Pakistan will keep close watch on development. So this is my view. I'm not saying Israel or USSR didn't have a role in this, Hannah. So like I saw Bandala's interview saying that Israel was helping India. I'm not sure. I've not seen anything of this, Hannah. But other people fighting for liberation and freedom actually supported Indira Gandhi. So Yasser Arafat of Palestine was pro-Indira Gandhi. Cubans, Fidel Castro was friends with Indira Gandhi. So it's juxtaposed, like when you look at this history and you see Fidel Castro coming to Indira Gandhi's funeral, Arafat coming to Indira Gandhi's funeral and saying, oh, Sadi Pen Margi, basically, Anna. And then Sikhs are getting murdered on the streets of Delhi for that many days. Carry on with your questions that you put on there. So role of local population Operation Blue Star, did they support the Sikhs? Yes, they did support the Sikhs. Many came out to save the Sikhs, longer risked their lives, and or gave refuge to escaping Sikhs. It is said many of the fighting Singhs actually survived by taking refuge in the homes of Hindus who were sympathetic. So that's a Babra Khalsa Singhs. That's what I've been informed by Singhs who know them. Locals came out and celebrated the army at the end of the attack as well. So you got this extremes of one people supporting the Sikhs, but then these people coming out at the end of the attack giving alcohol or cigarettes to the army. But this would be extremist Hindus and all those propped up by the government because the government wanted to make out as if this happened. But the general population of Amritsar is pro-Sikh and loves Harjinder Sahib. So when we look at Shiv Sena and stuff, it's very, very fringe in Punjab. And they'll do one video making a bland statement about the Saints or the Sikhs, and then the next day they'll be apologising because they've got no support. And Shiv Sena across India isn't as bad as the Punjab one. The Punjab one is actually the worst branch, which goes totally anti-Sikh. Why Sant Jarnail Singh was not an agent? And my answer to this, an agent is of use. Sant was independent from day one. Sant Kartar Singh had gone against Indira Gandhi, so why would she go back to the same Taksal who had been her main Sikh opposition, a major thorn which led to her election loss in 1981? But the Akalis are the ones who peddled this lie. Sant is a tool of the Congress. Why was the movement justified? Only fighting for the rights of Punjab. That's what the Sikhs were doing prior to 1994. That's why the movement was justified. It was peaceful. We had the sporadic assassinations of the odd people, but overall, Sikhs are en masse courting arrest peacefully. Very little actual Sikh demands and a Sikh specific demands. So it wasn't a communal problem. Were demands to improve autonomy of all Indian states, as was already said, and improve the economic fabric of all Punjab. And now, questions continued, where you lot start being controversial and trying to get me beat up by the Buddha Dal. What was the role of Baba Sant Singh in 1984? He didn't participate in the Dharmi of the Morcha from 1982, nor had any role in 1984. So that question was there. I've answered the question. I'm not going to go beyond that question. I don't need to expand on that. Real figures of deaths in Operation Blue Star. The government white paper says 493 Sikhs were killed. And when they say the 493 Sikhs, they list it as terrorists and innocents dash. So they're not saying that the 493 Sikhs that were killed, who was fighting against them, who wasn't. So they're actually admitting they have no idea who they killed. 86 injured and 592 arrested. So the 592 that are arrested mostly end up in Jodhpur jail in Rajasthan, and there was even children as part of these arrests as well. So I'm talking about like kids under the age of 14 were arrested as well. Kashwant Singh, the author who's pro Indira Gandhi before the attack, and said in excess of 5,000 dead Sikhs. And Ved Marawaha, who used to be like a governor of a state and a high-ranking police officer as well, in his book he says 4,712, which seems like a really obscure figure. So he might have got it from a government source. But there is also all other people saying, like Rajiv Gandhi made a statement somewhere saying, I think 7,000, but then he retracted the statement and you can't find it now. But there is talk of that. But I would say definitely in the thousands for Sikhs. Where were the Nihang Singhs and Khalsa for June 1984? Again, trying to get me beat up. There would have been some Nihang Singhs in the complex. And my view is this, all Sikhs who are Amritdhari are Nihangs. All the Nagoke Singhs wore Nihang Bana. So Nagoke is a bend, and there's a lot of Nagoke Jathana who fought in the attack. The Khalsa Farges who fought in 1984, as far as I'm concerned, and those who carried the battle on after 1984, after June, that is the Khalsa Forge. So I'm not sure who this question is trying to allude to, because a Farge is someone who's actually active, not retired, or not ex. So a Farge is who's actually someone who practices the art of warfare, I'm not in part of the Khalsa Farge as far as I'm concerned, unless I do something that a Farji would do. Otherwise, I'm a Farji by name, not by nature. And so you're only an army if you practice warfare when needed by the nation that you proclaim to protect. In Delhi alone, in 1984, in November, 200 Gurdwara were attacked with mass beadbiyan. And the Sikh force then rose, as no peace could be had with such large-scale desecration of Sikh and Gurdwara. So the Farge rose. That's for you to decide who that Farge was and what uniform they wore, what sampradaya they were associated, what Jathapandi. But that was the Farge, because the Farge actually came to the forefront and fought. They didn't sit at home, I'm actually pleased with myself, did it in 54 minutes. Any questions? I don't know how this Discord works now. Go on, Babio, whoever the moderator is. Mera to kam ho gaya.
Ajivagri ji, you're done?
Yeah.
Okay, good, Bajio. So I would ask the moderators, would you please post the questions from the question box so we can ask Bhai Savji. And if anyone feels like asking a question, please feel free to unmute, and ask your questions. So, Bhai Savji, I will tag you in one channel now. Bhai Savji, can you see the event question box channel? Oh, no, you can't. Just give me a second. I'll just give you the permission. Okay.
Yep, got it now.
There you go.
चलो आया.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a question with evidence.
Yeah.
Yes. Can go ahead and read that
Huh?
out.
Wait. Where is it? One second. I'll see.
Okay.
I
If,
can't see the question.
okay, just a second. Mm-hmm. There you go.
You do not have permission to view the message history of the back question. So it's
Okay.
work से नादे नहीं था नहीं दस्ता हो सकता.
Yeah, I'm gonna sunauna ਲੱਗਾ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ. Just a second. You should be okay. So, Bhai Sabji, a question is, with evidence showing that India planned a systematic genocide of the Sikhs, Blue Star, followed by Woodrow's and Shuddhikaran, and orchestrated killings in November, facilitated and encouraged by the state, how can the international community stay silent, such as the UN? What is the difference in condemnation between the Sikh genocide and, say, the Jewish Holocaust?
It's quite simple, isn't it? Firstly, if you think about it like this, we're going to go to the UN, United Nations. We don't have a single vote at the United Nations. What do we bring to the table? We can't control one nation to vote for us. We can't buy one vote at that table. So Sikhs have done it recently. They took the genocide petition by Sikhs for Justice. So we got 1 million Sikhs to sign the petition, and Sikhs who work with the UN knew what to do, so they got it petitioned, but nothing happened. That went nowhere. So the problem we have is, as a community, the Jews and the Holocaust and everything that happened with World War II, the Jews were politically placed after World War II to actually carve out a state out of nothing, in essence, because Palestine existed at the time, and through Palestine and through arms and everything else, they actually made a new sort of colonial state and set up by colonial powers. But the Jews were in places of power in other states where they could control politics. So when I was in the UK and I was a student, so like when the dinosaurs were about, there's an organisation called the National Union of Students. And as part of British Organisation of Students, we went twice to their national conference. And some of our settings were quite friendly with the UJS, which is the Union of Jewish Students. And what used to happen is the president of the National Union of Students back then would only become the president if the UJS backed that person. That's the Union of Jewish Students. So if you look in terms of UK population, the UK population of Jews is the same as Sikhs in the UK. So the Jews were even controlling, may still be the case, the national scene of student politics. And whoever becomes the president of the National Union of Students usually has a very prosperous future as a politician. So Tony Blair was the leader as well at one point, and he became the Prime Minister of the UK. So in terms of international condemnation and stuff, the Sikhs back in the day did open a Palestine embassy in Ecuador. So we got one South American state backing us. They opened a embassy there. I don't know if it was like of any use, but they did a little press release, went there, and he was a councillor of Khalsa, and Dr. Jagdeep Singh Chauhan leading it. So they did do that back in the day, but really internationally, we've never had any support in terms of our movement. And since September the 11th, it's become very hard for Sikhs to support the Sangharsh and stuff. So Sikh organisations got banned across America, UK, and other places. So it's become even worse. All right, so the second question I'm going to go on to. So what can we do for 1984 campaigns outside of India? The first thing you can do, all of you as young people, Sidhu Moosewala Maria, got shot. How many people? It doesn't end. It's been how many days? Yeah, our whole social media is full of Sidhu Moosewala. Sidhu Moosewala's death drowned out the 84 posts that we usually do. Yeah, so that voice really got drowned out. I'm not saying it should have or it shouldn't have happened, but my point is, as an author and an educator, it really grinds my gutti, let's say, whereby Sikhs sit on social media and every year you've got new Sikhs churning out new tweets and other things when people like me have written whole books for you lot to take the book and just regurgitate it. I don't care. Put your own name to the tweet. Mera naam na. We don't care. The whole reason we create this podcast is for you lot to be armed with information. And if you're not armed with the information, how can we fight Asangarh? So our Asangarh is all based on us being intellectual and having intellectual arguments. So it shouldn't be down to myself, shouldn't be down to Shamsher Singh and SYF, shouldn't be down to the few Sikhs who put their head out or their neck out. Every Sikh should be educated in our recent history and know how to politically fight this fight. And then after that, once we're educated ourselves, then we can enter other spheres of life and do that prachar. And then you've got a next question on this. Can you touch upon Bachchan and Baba Thark Singh about something in Jadvikala and provide some context? So this is a controversial point, yes? So some sayings, I spent time with Baba Thark Singh, and while Babaji was alive, I believe that Bachchan that Sant's alive, Hannah. So there's two ways of interpreting this Bachchan, Hannah. So either Sant Jarnail Singh's alive and escaped and didn't get shaheed in 1984, and I don't condemn those Sikhs who believe that. I do condemn those Sikhs who say we're waiting for Sant to come because we can't do anything to them till then. Because Sukha and Jinder believed Sant Jarnail Singh was alive, but they still fought and gave shaheed and they killed Vedya. So the Singhs in the movement who believe Sant was in Jadvikala and they still did the Sangharsh. So my argument is, if someone is saying Sant's in Jadvikala, if Sant's in Jadvikala and he turns up today, he's going to turn around and ask you, what did you do for the Sangharsh? And if you said, I was waiting for you, I think he'll slap you. So that's one to those people who say Sant in Jadvikala. Secondly is, I personally believe now, I've changed my view over the years, which is Sant will come back, but he's going to come back in another body and he will set a Khalsa. So Babaji's Bachchan still become true. And some people try to argue that, oh, Babaji not declaring Sant Jarnail Singh being Shaheed threw the movement backwards. But if you actually look at Singhs who fought in the Sangharsh, a lot of them believe Sant was alive, but they carried on giving Shaheed and they carried on fighting. So that didn't affect them. So I'm not sure who they're talking about of it affecting or stopping. Anyway, that's the two questions. Is there any more? Or can I go to sleep? It's at Would the massacre in October and November still have happened if Indra wasn't killed? So you mentioned earlier in this, in the first question, Anna, Operation Shuddhikaran, Anna. So Operation Shuddhikaran, I think, is mentioned by Sangat Singh in his book, which is a mass raping operation. And even the October and November massacres, what the Sikhs who were in the know actually say is that it was already planned to mass kill the Sikhs. And if you look at what happens with Indira Gandhi gets assassinated on the 31st of October, but by night on the 31st of October, Sikh houses are already identified. So like little signs put on Sikh houses, paint or whatever it may be, and then they're attacked systematically. So how could they get state apparatus to attack so quickly if it wasn't already pre-planned? So what the argument in the Sangharsh is that they were going to do it anyway, and the killing of Indira Gandhi just brought it forward. It was going to happen anyway.
Bhai Sabji, is there any way we can support you? So please let us know. What can we do to support Avji?
ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਚੁੱਪ ਕਰਕੇ ਸਾਡੀ ਅਰਦਾਸ ਕਰੋ, ਚੜ੍ਹਦੀ ਕਲਾ ਦੀ, ਹੋਰ ਕੋਈ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੀ. And in terms of our books and everything else, it's you can buy them from Amazon, and our website, we don't really sell the books through there, so some of the links might be broken, but you can get them from Amazon and anywhere.
Okay.
But other than that, yeah, that's it really. I don't think there's anything.
So, okay, everyone, make sure to fulfill Paisa's wish and do a dance for them. Baki Paisabji, we'll post all your social media links here. I'll get them from you and I'll paste them here. Thank you for coming on, Paisab. Very honored to have you. Thank you for the talk and taking up the time.
I apologize because speaking to a screen is very hard. I might have spoken too quickly. So माफ करना जे साडी गंदी बोली दी समझ नहीं आई किसी ਨੂੰ. ठीक है.
ठीक है भाई साहब जी. Thank you so much.
All right then. Okay, चंगा. वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा.
वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा, वाहिगुरु जी
वाहिगुरु जी की
की